We can't manage what we don't measure. So if you have no idea what you are consuming, and then same goes for your cardio, your strength training, whatever it is in terms of your fitness, like let's take steps even as an example. If we have no baseline and we have no concept of where you currently are, how can we possibly expect to level up in any sort of way or make a change in the right direction, whether that's less, whether that's more, depending on what your specific health goals are. We just don't know where we're going. It's like literally taking a shot in the dark. And I think that's also a big reason why a lot of us will jump from program to program in search for this like secret formula or this answer that we think we're going to get somewhere else.
Let's link up with Krista on the FYX. She's a wellness coach with a focus on mental well-being and physical strength.
What is happening, FYX listeners? Welcome to episode 59 of the FYX podcast. I am your host, Krista Huber, and we've got a little bit of a departure from our typical format for today's episode. You guys are about to tune into a live conversation that I recorded about a week ago with two of my incredible friends who are actually no strangers to the FYX podcast. They are two fellow nutrition coaches, Jamie Brewis and Jillian Smith, and they run a nutrition coaching program known as the Lady Power Moves Project. If you've been listening to the show for a little while, we actually did an episode where I interviewed them and we talked about a challenge that we were putting on over the summer. It was a free 3-day challenge where we basically gave people some insight into exactly how they could navigate their experience with summer barbecues, different holidays, weddings, graduation parties, whatever it was that sometimes put them in situations that it was a little bit more difficult to choose the right foods or really stay committed and on track with whatever their fitness and nutrition goals might be. So if that's an episode that's of interest to you, especially after listening to this conversation, I have linked it down in the show notes if you want to go check it out. But for today's episode, Jillian and Jamie are hosting another one of those challenges right now under their brand. And this one is a 21-day challenge. And in that challenge, they have brought so many different and amazing resources to the women who are participating in it. And they're kind enough to ask me to join as a speaker for one of their Facebook Live events. So we did that. And like we always do when the three of us get together for a chat, we had such a great conversation that I said to them, hey, I would really love if we could repurpose this for a podcast episode, because I really think that all of the FYX listeners and anybody out there who may be brand new to the show, which if you are, welcome, might benefit from hearing this. So that's exactly what you're getting today. This specific conversation covers why resistance training is superior to cardio. We talked about a whole lot. We threw in some science. We talked about some research studies surrounding this exact topic. Now, there's nothing about this that is necessarily new in any way. This has been researched for a while, yet unfortunately, and as evidenced by a lot of the conversation we were having and some of the great questions we were getting from people in the audience who had tuned in for this conversation as it was happening live, there are still so many people out there who think that the answer is to jump on a treadmill, jump on an elliptical, go to 101 group fitness classes. And that's really where we spent a lot of our time in this conversation just because of my background in that space. And yet they're frustrated because they're still not seeing results. A big reason behind that, and we get into more detail in this during the episode, even in detailing our own experiences in trying this high intensity class, this high intensity workout, is because we just assume like, oh, my friend is doing this and she seems like she's seeing really good results. Now, none of this is to say that you won't see results from taking a route like that. It's just that there's going to be a plateau and there's going to be an upper limit where if you just kept going with more and more of something, it is no longer going to serve you in the way that it might have been in the beginning. So we unpack that a little bit. And then we also talk about how a lot of these same principles that come to apply to your fitness also apply to your nutrition goals, and how really the two need to go hand in hand. And it's important to not only focus on getting whole quality foods, but also eating in a way that matches exactly what you're doing in the gym so that your workouts can feel good and you can feel like you have energy, and really just ultimately trying to help you move away from the mindset. And Jamie words it so well. I mean, she talked about her personal experience in working with Jillian as a client and just hearing from Jillian the opposite of everything she was ever told. As in, hey, why don't we try to do a little less? Why don't we try to pull back a little bit on the cardio, even eat a little bit more food than you may be used to, and just see what happens? And spoiler alert, she got a lot more results that she really wanted and what she had been chasing all along. And honestly, that was just a little bit of a mind fuck, for lack of a better word. It's the polar opposite of all of the messaging that we get out there. Like, do more of this, do more of that. Or my friend tried this diet and then she was working out this amount day in, day out, and she looks amazing, so I should go and try that too. I think it's really important to remember that if we just jump on this bandwagon of doing what everybody else does, it kind of closes our mindset and it convinces us that there's only one way to do something. So I challenge you in listening to this conversation to think about the bigger picture, even beyond fitness and nutrition, and maybe think about anything in your life where you've been kind of set in your ways and you're really convinced that there's only one way to do something, and ask yourself, is that method really pushing me closer to the person I want to be or the physique I want to have? Or am I just telling myself that story? And if you examine that a little further and get into it a little deeper and figure out that it's not actually helping you get to where you want to go, what is the worst thing about trying something different? The only potential negative outcome is that you try it for a little while and maybe you figure out that's not going to serve you either. But it won't be time wasted because at least you'll have that answer. So I hope you guys enjoy this conversation. And if you stay with it all the way until the very end, you'll hear us answer a few Q&A questions that we got from people who were listening in the audience. And I think a lot of them were really great. And I also really appreciated the opportunity to do that because you get to hear exactly what's on people's minds. And if I had to guess, a lot of the questions that were asked may be the same questions that you, the listener, have as you're listening throughout this conversation. So be sure to listen all the way through. We had a good little laugh at the end that I wanted to share right in the introduction because I thought it was the perfect summary and the perfect tie-in for a title for this episode. We talked about, thanks to somebody's joke in the comments in the chat box on Zoom when we were recording this, she said, so you quite literally work your ass off when you're doing cardio, and newsflash, we meant it in the way of like having no butt at all. So another takeaway from this conversation is that if you want to build a booty, we suggest that you work on some glute bridges, put some weight on a barbell, and see what your body can do that way versus hours and hours of cardio. So if you leave this conversation and you're wondering, what the heck do I do next? Some of the Q&A questions, the best ones that we had were, hey, can you help me with a strength training program? And yes, we can. If you are the type of person who has kind of shied away from going into the gym and lifting on your own, maybe because you're just, quite frankly, and being super transparent and honest, like, I don't know what to do. I've been there. I've been that person. I talk about this in the episode and explaining my journey through group fitness and why I felt comfortable there. It was a part of my social life. It was a way to make friends, and that all was well and good. But if you want to see real physique changes, we got to run to the dumbbells, and we have to be willing to maybe step outside of our comfort zone a little bit. But the most effective and most successful way that you can do that is by looking to someone like me, like Jillian, like Jamie, who can guide you through that process. And that's exactly what we're here to do. So please don't hesitate to reach out. I'd love to chat with you. Always looking for the opportunity to help somebody, whether that's with their nutrition or with their fitness. We all share a similar story in the sense that we got into this because we didn't know what to do ourselves, and we want to be able to give that back, hopefully tenfold. So as always, from wherever you're listening from, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. If you got anything out of this episode, you know the drill. Be sure to share it with a friend, and we will catch you on our next episode.
Well, hello, everybody, to anybody who is in the Zoom meeting with us. Welcome. And then anyone who's watching this live stream via Facebook or later on. My name is Krista Huber, and I'm actually no stranger to this group. I have had the pleasure of working with Jillian and Jamie in the past, and I love everything that the Lady Power Moves Project stands for. I've gotten to see these guys really grow, and we've gotten to collaborate on a lot of different things. And to kind of jump off of Jillian's point about me being the queen of knowing lots of things about cardio not being the answer for you, the big reason for that is because I got my start in the fitness industry in group fitness in particular. And for those of you who are watching or listening to this, I know Jillian and Jamie can personally attest to this, but a lot of us have kind of come out of that world and getting our feet wet when it comes to fitness. I mean, how many people like, and this is a great thing. So I want to preface this entire conversation by saying that I love group fitness. I teach it still to this day. I actually manage a studio. I'm a part of the management team of a gym that has 4 boutique studios inside of it. And some of them are very heavily focused on cardio. However, what I think is important is that we're starting to see a shift in the fitness industry in really prioritizing strength, even in these settings. And there's good reason for that. And that's exactly what we're going to get into today's conversation. But before we kind of talk about some of the positive components, we do have to touch on why strength training is necessarily better. So rather than even calling this conversation why cardio is not the answer for fat loss, I want to ground this in the idea that we're going to talk about the positives of resistance training and how that's more beneficial for you than cardio. I was the person I was a swimmer all growing up. And quite frankly, I know the two of you guys played sports too. I could eat whatever I wanted when I was swimming, right? You want to talk about doing lots of cardio. I was in the pool, swimming laps back and forth for hours at a time. I really didn't necessarily need to think about what I was eating through high school. And then when I got to college, that was actually when I had my first foray into group fitness. I started teaching classes, had a lot of free time back on my schedule after not being in the sports world anymore and feeling like my life was so controlled around that pool schedule. And ultimately, I just started feeling like, I'm like, wow, I'm putting a lot of work in the gym. I am getting on the treadmill, getting on the elliptical, doing a little strength training too. But quite frankly, I didn't have the experience. Like I wasn't in the weight room, like say a guy who was on the high school football team, learning what a deadlift was, how to use a barbell, any of those sorts of things. And I frankly felt intimidated by that aspect of the gym. That ultimately played a big part in why I continued to be a part of the group fitness scene, because I felt like I was accepted there, right? Like I felt like I could go into the gym. There were lots of other people who didn't necessarily know what they were doing. And we had a trainer or had a group fitness instructor leading this workout who could give us that type of education and coaching to at least get us going in the right direction. I also felt like the workout went by really fast. And I ultimately used it as a way to make lots of new friends anytime I moved to a new city. I lived in Charlotte, North Carolina for about 5 years. And that was really where I jumped into the group fitness scene to ultimately transition into fitness as a full-time career. I now, very similar to Jillian and Jamie, have an online coaching business and focus on nutrition coaching for women who are these like group fitness junkies and feel like they're jumping from workout to workout and really struggling to not necessarily see results. You could bust your butt for those 45 minutes to an hour in that class, and they're hard. Like there's no debating that. A lot of these workouts, if they're led by a great instructor, they're not only difficult, they get you excited to work out, they help you keep to a consistent schedule. Again, all really positive things. But for me, things started to change when I actually paid attention to my nutrition and paired that with the right type of workouts. So I think in us, just to kind of facilitate this as more of a conversation between all three of us, we're going to open this up to talk more about like, what are all these different workout options out there? And more importantly, how do you figure out what's best for you in the context of a lot of the work that you're doing in here in this group with these two amazing coaches to help you figure out what the hell you're eating on a daily basis. And hey, this is hard and this takes a lot of effort. So personally, if I'm going to put all that effort in those other 23 hours of the day, I'd really like to make sure my fitness for those 45 minutes to an hour actually aligns with that plan, because none of this is done in a vacuum. It all fits together like a puzzle piece.
For sure. Yeah, that was such a good intro for this conversation. And, there's a lot of different ways that we can like approach, many different avenues where we could go with this conversation. I will say that, very, very much so, like Krista said, it is totally dependent on what your goals are, right? So most people in this group or in these challenges are just looking to drop some body fat. Maybe they're wanting to add a little bit of lean tissue or muscle mass to their frame. They're not necessarily looking to be competitive inside of any specific sport. And if that is the case, it is a little bit of a different conversation for those individuals. It's still a lot of similar underlying parallels though. Like I like to use myself as an example because I was super competitive in CrossFit to the point of where I ended up competing in elite division against all the big name CrossFitters at Wodapalooza. And that was always kind of my goal. That was like, I checked that off the bucket list. Like, I want to compete elite. And what I did to get my performance to that next level was very similar of what everybody needs to do in order to get their body composition down to like a lower body fat percentage of where they would like to be. And part of that was like literally, even as a competitive CrossFitter, I had to pull the reins back on all of the high intensity CrossFit workouts I was doing in order to not only get leaner, but also see the performance improvements that I desired to make. But that being said, obviously, as a competitive athlete, I had to push myself, but I never pushed myself more than once a week to the point where I was like, I needed to lay down after I finished working out. It is completely unnecessary to put that much stress on your body. And majority of the time, when you're not with somebody that's been experienced in the field, like Krista, Jamie, or myself, and it's just like, you know, I hate to bash on it, but it's so relevant in the industry. Like somebody that just like went and got some certification and immediately started coaching a group fitness class. And if you sweat more, it's better, right? Like that's what we're conditioned to believe. And that's not necessarily the case. And I preface saying that like there are some really amazing group fitness instructors out there. There are some that have no idea what they're doing and it's just a passion of theirs. So it's really important to understand and be able to like advocate for yourself and differentiate there. And I know like Jamie has had a similar experience in the past too. So
yeah, I was just going to add to that. And I remember going back when I first started working out, I had no idea what I was doing really. I just thought you had to go hard in the gym, like real hard, and eat less. So that's what I did. And it worked for a hot second. I lost the weight, but then I drove my hormones into the ground. My internal body, like internally, was so stressed out that my body was not functioning the way that it should be. And I totally plateaued out. I felt like crap all the time. I couldn't function. And that's because, and I love what you said, Krista, where you need to be eating to supplement the exact way that you're training. So if you're not doing that, you're running your hormones into the ground. You're going to run your metabolism into the ground. And then after time, your body's not going to be able to function. You're not going to do anything, which is where I think a lot of women are stuck. So yeah, I love that you said that. And I 100% agree. And I've experienced that as well. It wasn't until I actually figured out how to eat and eat more to supplement how I was training, decrease my stress level, and everything changed for me too.
Well, no,
I'm not sure. Sorry, Jillian, go ahead.
No, you're fine. I just really quickly wanted to add to that piece of the conversation was like, I was told basically eat like Whole30 or paleo or whatever specific to CrossFit, right? And like Jamie said, it worked extremely well until it didn't. And I hit the wall, and eating the same way and doing the same workouts, my body composition actually shifted to more body fat, less muscle. Like with 2 to 4 hours of different workouts, strength training, cardio, whatever, gymnastics, skill acquisition, like I was still doing all the same things, but then I started to lose muscle and gain body fat because I was not fueling the demands of the type of exercise that I was participating in. So it's like, it's so important to understand and to like appropriately apply these different exercise implements to yourself.
And I want to say too, is it is definitely a mind game because I also teach group fitness classes. And if somebody is overtraining 5 days a week and that's their mentality and that's what society and culture has told us to do, and I know Krista and Jillian, you've had this where you tell somebody, I need you to train less, eat more, that does not click. That did not click for me when somebody told me that. Like it doesn't make sense to a lot of people. Yeah, it doesn't make sense. I mean, it makes sense because I know it does what you need to do for your body, but it's definitely a mind game.
Yeah. And I think Jillian said it, it's scary. Jamie, you said it from your own personal experience, not to mention like you didn't have the advantage of at least knowing even an eighth of the information that you know now from working with Jillian yourself personally in your own experience of having her as a coach, and then taking it upon yourself to get more educated, right? And that's the whole reason why we join a lot of these different groups. And I think, Jillian, I saw an awesome post that you did the other day, and I didn't mention to you that I wanted to bring this up, but I'm just going to go for it because I don't think I reacted to it. And I meant to send you a message on Instagram. But you guys are in this group. It's part of a 21-day challenge. And I loved that Jillian acknowledged that 21-day challenges are not the be all end all. So if you didn't see this post, it's one that you should absolutely go back and read. I don't remember what the photo was specifically, but I did read the entire caption. And I was just like, hell yeah, because I think so many people jump on the internet. It's the beginning of the year. We're right in that week. As of like this past Monday, in case you guys didn't know, the stat gets thrown around all the time. This third week of January is when like 90+% of people give up on whatever New Year's resolution or fitness and nutrition goal that they set for the year. They only lasted those 3 weeks. We're talking about a 21-day challenge right now, right? And Jillian gave this amazing context to explain, like, just because she's putting these sorts of groups together with her brand alongside Jamie and all the other amazing women that make up these groups, it's not to say that this is going to solve all your answers. This 30 minutes conversation, of course, is not going to give you everything you need to know to walk away from here and execute. The big thing is, will it educate you? Yes. Is it going to challenge you to think about something a little bit differently? 1,000%. But it's really, truly just a jumping off point to kind of dip your toe in the water and start to get you thinking a different way, starting to encourage you to set better boundaries, encouraging you to make time to exercise, encouraging you to think twice about your sleep. And honestly, that is the difference maker in why a group like this will ultimately be that great like feeder or whatever word you want to use for it to help you go in the direction that you want to go versus doing a program for a month, jumping to the next one. And to tie that back to cardio and group fitness and versus resistance and strength training, that's something that I just see all the time. A lot of people come into the group fitness world and they're like, I love variety. And sometimes variety is actually the killer in this situation. So if you're talking with someone like Jillian, who's been doing CrossFit for a long time, especially at the competitive level, Jamie, I know you do CrossFit yourself, but I think one of the benefits to CrossFit is the fact that it is one of those, let's call it, I'm going to put group fitness in quotes because yes, you could do CrossFit on your own and there's all different levels and everything, but I still consider it a part of that like brand of group fitness. I think they do a really good job of being a little bit more repetitive with your workouts because if you're working with the right coach, to Jillian's point earlier, anybody can jump in and do a CrossFit certification in a weekend, which is a little bit questionable in terms of who you're working with. But say that to say, most of the time you can walk into a box and you can expect that there's certain major lifts you're going to do all the time. A lot of them are pretty basic too. I'm talking a bench press, a push press, squats, whether those are back or front squats, deadlifts, you name it. Really standard exercises that if you walk into a cardio HIIT class, a lot of the times the trainer is too occupied with like, how can I make this as hard as possible? And for some reason that's gotten associated with it always being different every time because I don't want the person to be bored. And number two, how many different movements can I layer one on top of the other to create these compound things? Like I have this conversation with a lot of the coaches that I manage. It's not necessary to do something like a reverse lunge into a bicep curl with a jump squat and then an overhead press. Maybe you think you look cool, but if you have to judge the fitness level of anybody in your room, that's one thing. But more importantly, like how does a person actually build their strength? Because between you and me, the best way that I get really good at my bicep curls is standing next to a bench with my knees slightly bent. My legs are not moving at all. And all I'm doing is really putting my mind in that muscle and focusing on that bicep curl. And then week after week, I really, really zero in on that exercise and making sure that, okay, if I was curling 12.5-pound dumbbells this week, I'm going to do that for 2 or 3 weeks. And then I'll go to 15s and then I'll go to 20. But we run into this situation where somebody's formatting this 45-minute circuit for us, trying to throw in a bunch of different things. You're probably getting a little bit tired at the same time, or not probably, you definitely are. I mean, most of the time I leave a group fitness class, if it's not smartly programmed, I like want to lay on the floor afterwards, like Jillian was describing. And then I don't know if I really am able to measure that progress and challenge myself to go to the next week with that heavier set of dumbbells, because chances are that set of lunges with bicep curls that we did on Tuesday of this week, I'm not going to see it again for maybe a month. And in that situation, it all relates back to the same principles that a lot of us use for tracking our food. So I'm not sure if any of you ladies have really gotten into that inside of this program yet, but if you do continue to work with these two women, it will be a component if it makes sense for you. And the biggest reason why we spend time tracking our food, learning how to weigh it, understanding portion sizes is for the number one reason of a quote that I love saying is we can't manage what we don't measure. So if you have no idea what you are consuming, and then same goes for your cardio, your strength training, whatever it is in terms of your fitness, like let's take steps even as an example. If we have no baseline and we have no concept of where you currently are, how can we possibly expect to level up in any sort of way or make a change in the right direction, whether that's less, whether that's more, depending on what your specific health goals are. We just don't know where we're going. It's like literally taking a shot in the dark. And I think that's also a big reason why a lot of us will jump from program to program in search for this like secret formula or this answer that we think we're going to get somewhere else.
This is actually like a great like follow up to the kickoff call conversation that we had, because that was like the number one point that I tried to drive home inside of that call with everybody that showed up or that did watch the replay. Was not trying to do everything all at once. And I think it parallels so well with the idea of like thinking you have to do more cardio or you have to do more, even if it is more weightlifting or whatever. And going back to a lot of what Krista was relaying just now was, you need repetition. And it was the same concept that I talked about on the kickoff call. Like if you are not used to tracking your foods, like literally that's all you need to be doing this week. You just need to master inputting your foods into whatever tracking app that you desire. The same concept goes for your workouts if you really desire to see change in the shape of your body. And there is a huge difference between weight loss and body fat loss. 99.9% of the time, most people coming in don't understand that. I know I didn't when I first started on my journey. It was like, if the scale said that I weighed less, I was happy. It was a huge win. But what if you're also losing muscle in that process? You're also losing the shape that you desire to see, come to fruition in your figure. So it's really important that you understand the cardio implements necessary and that you aren't bouncing all over the place. You don't need to lay down on the floor as soon as you're done. You're not doing something just to keep yourself entertained. Like, unfortunately, the boring workouts are probably the ones that are going to create the biggest transformation in your body. And like, if you look at the bodybuilding population, I love to use this as an example. I started my fitness journey doing more of like a traditional bodybuilding split, like steady state cardio, all the things, just eat chicken, rice, and broccoli. And like, yeah, it was working well, but it was super boring. And then that's kind of when I ventured into CrossFit. But I can tell you that the change in my physique happened much faster doing those boring workouts than it did confusing my muscles in CrossFit. And I'm not bashing CrossFit. I still love CrossFit. I still participate in CrossFit, but it's now that I have that understanding, I treat my CrossFit workouts 1,000,000% differently than I did as a brand new person, like starting their journey inside of CrossFit, if that makes sense. So there's a lot of good in all of what you just said. And it just really piggybacks off of like, do not try to do everything all at once. Don't get shiny object syndrome. Like, let's figure out what's most important for you as an individual and then begin building from there.
And this is why we're so aligned, because I literally did a podcast episode probably the same week that you guys had that meeting that I called "You're actually doing too much." And that's the reason why you're not meeting your nutrition and fitness goals. I have so many clients that will come to me and they say something like, well, we've been working together for this amount of time. And, a lot of times they're doing their own research too, which I love. Like, you're invested in the process. Amazing. But that can often be difficult in this space that is very saturated with people that aren't necessarily qualified to talk about some of the things that they're talking about. And so then a lot of people leave confused and they're like, well, I read this and this person suggested that, and that person said this and this worked for them. And sometimes it's just like, let's take 2 steps back and ask the basics. Like, did you get 8 hours of sleep on average this week? If you didn't do that, like, it almost doesn't really matter what you ate. And I can tell you guys from personal experience, I had a client text me this morning. She has been really committed to the process of tracking her food and treating her weight loss as a journey and a transformation over almost a 2-year period. And she still has the same basic principles in place. And she said to me, she actually just came out of a calorie deficit. So she was going through a dieting phase, and we're bringing her back up to maintenance. She's traveling a lot over the next couple of months. We're really focusing on the season that she's in. And I had adjusted her macros from where they'd been for a long time with another coach that she was working with through this calorie deficit. And she texted me this morning and she goes, I barely got any sleep 2 nights ago. I noticed that as a result of that, I was craving a lot of sweets. And she was like, I know that my issue was the sleep. So I'm going to admit that first, which I'm so glad that she recognized that. She's like, however, I appreciate that you adjusted my macros because I really wanted a couple cookies and I was able to make that work. And there's so much to be said for there. That's kind of an aside when it comes to the flexibility of tracking your food and making things fit. But, you know, the same kind of deal applies here when it comes to your workouts, because I think a lot of times, like, we're so quick to think that, like, well, it has to be fun because that's what's going to help us stay consistent. And that's true, because consistency is king above all else. That's a reason why we're encouraging you to get into a routine with food tracking, encouraging you to get into a routine with better sleep habits or tracking your food or going to the gym. But I think that it's important to get someone else's perspective on, like, hey, why don't we try something for like 6 weeks? And even if it's the same thing every week for Monday, Wednesday, Friday, but then we have, like, I don't know, let's say you design a program that this is a program I do with my coach, and it's more of that bodybuilding split that Jillian's describing, is 3 to 4 major lifts, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, that are always the same. And what I mean by that is they're the same exercises, but we change the weight. And that's really where the magic happens in ultimately seeing those physique changes and pushing my body in a different way that has nothing to do with necessarily getting my heart rate up. But trust me, I'm tired afterward, even if I'm not sweating. Other than that, I always start my workouts off, for example, to get a little more specific with you guys so you can really kind of visualize this. If it's a Monday or a Wednesday and I'm focused on upper body, and then Tuesday, Thursday, I split for lower body, my Monday, Wednesday, those first 3 lifts are always going to be a bench press. I use a barbell, a push press, and a bent over row. And I always do those 3 lifts. You might think to yourself, that sounds like kind of lame if you're always doing the same thing every time. I can promise you that in tracking that information in a spreadsheet over the course of 12 weeks, I've never seen more consistent changes, not only in my physique, but more importantly, in my ability to put up numbers that I never thought I could hit. And honestly, half the reason why I couldn't hit them was because I was too busy running around doing like this HIIT class or this like metabolic conditioning class. And I was just tired. So I couldn't lift that way.
For sure. There's so much ability. Like, I love that you shared that like personal experience. It was, we have like 12-week programs built out for the women in our program, and it's literally awesome. Like the same main lift and on the same days of the week. Like, if you look at like the progression through the week, it's literally just simply progressive overload through either weight or volume of repetition, right? And then like, yeah, some of the like accessory movements or more bodybuilding specific movements, sure, there's a little more variation amongst those things, but it's like, there's not a whole lot that's different aside from that from week to week. And that's all I'm hearing from the girls that are doing it consistently is like, I can't believe how much weight I put on this lift this week. Like, it's amazing. Right? Like, holy shit. And now I'm eating more, and excuse my language, and I'm getting leaner and my waist is shrinking. And it's just like, yes, 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 yes. And I know that was like one of the craziest things for Jamie. It was for me when I was, nutrition coaching with Jason Phillips, was like, eat more, work out less intensely, and have a little more like, do the boring work, like, yep, do the boring work. And Jamie was just like, wait, you want me to eat how much? And then I remember her being like, wait, you don't want me to do that much cardio? Perfect. I didn't want to do it anyways. Like, who likes to crush themselves inside of cardio? Like, it feels good in the moment for like a little bit, but then like all of the like sort of byproduct of that, it's kind of like, wah, wah, like,
yeah,
and it goes back to that mind game again. Yeah, I know, at least for myself, I was big into CrossFit. Well, I say my journey started with like going to the gym and getting on the elliptical for an hour or getting on the treadmill for an hour. Is cardio, cardio, cardio. That's all I did. I didn't know how to do anything else. Then I got into CrossFit, and it was high intensity, high intensity, high intensity. And then I moved into powerlifting. Powerlifting, if you don't know what that is, it's just it's the same thing. It's repetition. It's it's all strength training. And that was a mind game for me too, because again, it's the same thing every single week, literally every single week. But after my 13-week cycle, I was the strongest I've ever been. I was the leanest I've ever been. And I was eating more. So it's crazy. And there was one thing that you said, Krista, about tracking your workouts. I tell all my clients to have a journal, write down the workout that you did, write down the weights that you did, but also keep that same journal to write how the workout felt. How did you sleep the night before? How was your nutrition? Because if you have that data, plus you're working with your nutrition coach, it's so easy to see and adjust the numbers so that it's specific to you.
Totally. And I think also Jamie and Jillian, like another thing that we haven't expressly said, but is an important kind of like fun little science fact that relates to cardio versus resistance training that is worth mentioning. If you guys have never really spent any time not doing cardio, you won't necessarily recognize this until you pull it out. But there's a ton of research around this that by doing consistent cardio over an extended period of time and just constantly focusing on that, you're actually going to wind up being hungrier. So if you do move in the other direction and trust the process and take that leap and just try something different for once, like if you won't know if you don't try, right? I would guarantee that if Jillian and Jamie really thought back to the first time that they adjusted their training to think less is more and then focus on eating more food, they'd be the first to tell you that they realized like they actually weren't as hungry as they were when they were constantly doing cardio. And hey, if you ultimately do move into a calorie deficit to go through that more standard or traditional word of dieting, I think you'd want to be in that spot where you're not going into it super hungry all the time. It's just going to make it easier. And as we said, like this isn't easy, but we're looking for ways to make it a little bit easier.
For sure. Yeah. And it's even like piggybacking off of that, you know, it's something that we manipulate with our clients is like even a basic step goal. We're either like pushing for 10K or maybe we're pulling it back, like dependent on where they're at inside of their season and their nutritional periodization relative to their workouts and all of that is, you know, we're getting more individualized in bringing that up, but like that's what it takes. There is no one size fits all cookie cutter when it comes to this, but 99.9% of the time women believe they need to be doing more high intensity or more cardio than they actually do. And if it is something that you enjoy, amazing, like go and push yourself like that once a week, but don't exceed that if you're looking to see transformational change in your physique. Like Krista said, you can go and you can get a good workout and you're not necessarily like dripping sweat by the end. I used to think I had to like go do a spin class and then go hit all the machines and then do abs and then do another 40 minutes of steady state cardio. And it worked well until I hit a plateau and I hit a wall and like everything, all my hormones are just downshifted, downregulated, slows, you know, that all of that slows the metabolism. So everything's so interconnected and it's really important to pay attention to those biofeedback cues along the way as well. I know Krista has been so kind to take this time out of her day and it's been a really great conversation. She does have a hard stop at 12:45. So we just want to make sure to cover the questions that were dropped in the chat box, and anybody on the live stream on Facebook, if you do have any questions, go ahead and post them to the comments at this time. And we'll go ahead and is there any other like main piece of advice that we would want to give before we jump into the answering the questions?
I just want to say really quickly, I know that I think it's a society and culture thing that tells women like cardio, where I know I have heard all the time, I don't want to weight train because I don't want that quote unquote manly jacked look. Right. And that's not the case. I'm here to we're all here to squish that myth where if you just want to feel strong, like a feminine, strong, lean look, this is the way to do it.
Yes, you literally read my mind, Jamie. That was the one other thing I wanted to bring up that I feel like is always the pushback that people give when it comes to strength training. Like, listen, unless you're on Instagram and you're looking at a lot of women who clearly had a little plastic surgery, let's say, to get those big booties that they have, I can promise you that they're not building those kinds of glutes by running on the treadmill, hitting a cycle class, or doing a bunch of HIIT style workouts. They are deadlifting heavy weight and they're putting plates on a bar and doing thrusters to make that happen. Like if you want that toned look and you want like a lifted butt, that comes from weights. No question about it.
Can I just add to that statement? Like, genetically speaking, I have very like strong legs, but like not much of a butt. And like when I was just a cardio junkie, it was literally like pancake ass. Like
I can't even picture you like that because your butt's amazing. Like, I don't know about you guys, but when I watched Jillian's videos, when she posts her reels of her working out, like I was thinking about some of the points I wanted to make in preparing for this call. And the one thing I just wanted to say, if any of you join this group, and look, there is nothing wrong with taking this approach of finding inspiration in someone else's physique and being like, hey, I would love to look like them. If Jillian or someone like Jamie happens to be your goals for that, like, I promise you, she obviously gives you the evidence and posting her workout videos. You can count the weight on that bar. You're not going to look that way if you just keep doing cardio. Like, she didn't get this way by doing a bunch of cardio, right? So if you need the living proof, there it is.
I'll have to dig out a picture. There's literally a photo of me in a CrossFit competition, like when I first transitioned into CrossFit. Yeah. And I'm like on the pull portion of a power snatch with the barbell. Yeah. For those of you that don't know, it's basically ground to overhead with the barbell. And you can see like the picture was taken from like the backside, and it's literally like, where did it go? Like, okay, I'm not making fun of anybody if that's the case, but I just remember seeing that picture and being like, what am I doing wrong? Because I had been working my ass off at that point for like almost 5 years in the gym, and like I wanted to add shape, like, so yeah. It just is to put into perspective that whole, you know, side of things of, you know, inside of this conversation. So I love that you brought that up. That's such a good point. I was totally not even thinking about it. Literally working my ass off. Yes.
Yeah.
Just commented that. That's amazing. I love you.
There's a different way of working your ass off that we want you guys to focus on. We need to like recoin that phrase or something. We need to change it. That'll be the new slogan for Lady Power Moves.
Hashtag work your ass off.
Yeah. I love
so
that.
Good. Okay. Well, we did want to get to these questions, and so I'm just
a bunch of great ones.
Yeah. I'm gonna start back from the top. In relation to the 21-day fix, how do you feel about the idea that it takes 21 days to form a habit? I have mixed feelings about that. I know, like, statistically speaking, that is what, you know, the experts say. I really think it takes like 6 to 12 weeks before something just becomes like, just purely based off of like empirical data of like my own experience and client experience, right? Of when something becomes second nature and it's no longer like a lot of effort to like make this one, like whether it's tracking or getting to the gym or whatever, where it's just like, this is part of like my daily hygiene. Like, you don't leave your house without brushing your teeth. I don't go without doing my workouts. Like, I feel like it takes that amount of time to get to that point. I don't know about you and your experience. I know that's what statistics show or say, is that 21 days. I think 21 days is a good start, but I don't think it's like really locked in at that point yet.
And I would just add to that, if you're somebody, I fully agree with everything that Jillian just said. And I think that this is something that's going to continue to be studied more. But if you are interested in the concept of habits, that's a huge part of the coaching that I do. It kind of relates back to just the concept of like the foundation and my mentioning of sleep and different things like that. Like, the basic goals of like, can you get 100 grams of protein? Then we can have more of a specific conversation about your workouts. The habit-based approach is really the driver of why we're sending you this message of not trying to do too many things at once. And there's a great book for that. It's called Atomic Habits. It's by James Clear. I highly recommend it to any single person for any aspect of your life. It does have a lot of excellent examples when it comes to trying to develop fitness and nutrition related habits, but it applies to everything. Like, it can be like, whether that's like a financial goal you have or something in your personal life. And I want to say that in that book, I felt like, I don't know if he expressly states it with any kind of data, but I really felt like the way the advice is given in it on how to really correctly develop habits that are going to last, as Jillian is saying, long term, he kind of debunks the whole 21-day thing and says that you do need longer. And it's not just about the period of time. I think that's a distinction we're ultimately trying to point out here, is it's not so much the length of time. There are a couple other components that go into it. And starting small is one factor. Stacking your habits with other habits that you already do well, or things that you kind of associate with as rewards, are all different things you need to consider in order to really create a habit that's going to help you achieve lasting results. So strongly encourage anybody to read that book. It's great.
I'm like, how did I miss that? Pulling that from that book, because I've read it a few times now.
Yeah, it's so good.
And I reference
so
like
good.
I'll pick up and read just like pieces of it sometimes when I'm like, I need a
Totally.
little inspo. So there's another one. What was the next one? Would you know someone to set up a workout routine? I'm not sure what workouts I need to do. So if you send us a message, we can point you in a direction with that. We do have a template for this 21-day challenge, but if that's something that you're looking to continue, that is the conversation we could have. But we can definitely at least get you the template to start off with. I have another one. It was a direct message, so I'm not sure if they wanted to just be, what's the word I'm looking for? Not seen, which is totally cool. Discreet. There's a word I'm like brain farting. I've always said I work out to eat. I just need to learn what to eat and when. So stay plugged in. Like,
yeah, you're in the right place if that's your mindset. I think like the mindset component is more what we want to attack with that. Like let's get away from the thought process of like working out for the sake of eating. Like, not to get it twisted with everything we were saying at the very beginning. Like, there's a difference in having that kind of like reward component, right? Of saying like, well, because I worked out really hard today, I'm going to go eat this thing. And that's not at all the messaging that we want to give when we're talking about this idea of like making sure your nutrition aligns with your workouts. It's for the sake of seeing results in the gym, whether that is in the form of your performance, i.e. stronger lifts, or in terms of your physique and your body composition changing too.
Not working your ass off.
Yeah, exactly. Full stop.
For sure. Yeah, it's such a huge shift. And the thing is, like, going back to the statement that there's not one cookie cutter, this is all, if you want sustainable, long-term, long-lasting results, it's very individualized. You shouldn't be fitting yourself into any specific diet or workout box. Of course, like we said at the beginning, that there are parallels between like what maybe you should do in the next person, but the application of that in and of itself will be very like one-on-one based. And
that's the best part about what you guys do, right? Like I think that's the coolest part about this combination of group and individualized coaching, because you're getting the support of these types of phone calls and conversations, and you can bounce ideas off of each other. I am in the Facebook group for this group. I'm also have been a part of the WhatsApp text, and they go off more than anything else on my phone. And I think that's amazing, because you're not just feeling supported only from Jillian and Jamie's perspectives, but other people who are going alongside this journey with you. There's so much power in that sense of community that these two are doing such a great job of cultivating. So factor that in when you're thinking about what you're getting out of this 21-day challenge, and then in continuing to work with Jillian and Jamie beyond that.
For sure. We appreciate you, Krista. We love you.
Yeah. Love you guys.
She's also amazing. Otherwise we wouldn't bring her in here. We're very selective about who we bring in for you guys. So the next question, we wanted to like get through these real quick. How do you know if you need to work on weight loss versus fat loss? My question for you would be, do you have, I would say anything more than like a 20 to 30 pound goal, you would want to focus more on overall weight. And then once you're like a little bit closer to that like desired size or shape, then it turns into more fat loss as opposed to like what's the number on the scale saying.
Yeah. And the good news is, if you focus on strength training too, you can kill two birds with one stone, which is the best part, right? Like there's also a ton of research that we didn't necessarily throw into the conversation, but worth plugging here. People have studied like one group doing steady state cardio on a treadmill or something like that, and another group doing like a 20-minute kettlebell kind of like complex or circuit. The group that was doing the kettlebells accomplished more in that amount of time in terms of calorie burn than the group that was just on the treadmill. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm very into things that are bang for my buck. So I definitely pick the strength training route for sure.
And then last question that I'm saying here is, and then I agree with everything Krista said. Sorry, I'm trying to like rapid fire get through these and
You're
get
good.
you out on time.
No worries.
Is there specific workouts that would prevent loose/extra skin as you lose weight or body fat? So My answer for you is, genetically speaking, everybody's like elasticity to their skin is going to be different. We can't put a guarantee on that, like period, the end. But if you do choose a sustainable, like a journey approach, as opposed to like, how fast can I do this? Your skin is going to respond so much better in the way that you desire than if you just try to like, how fast can I lose 100 pounds? Like just throwing out a number for number's sake. Like, you're going to have loose skin if you're like doing it at a rapid, accelerated rate. You know, it's just, I don't make the rules. It's the truth. So anything you guys would add to that?
I'll say candidly, I don't have as much experience with this in terms of like big transformations like that, because I've just seen so many different things. So I'm going to attest to Jillian's point that there's a lot of genetic factors that go into this. But I'll also say that I think it has a lot to do with prioritizing building muscle too, right? Because like that's going to help your tissue, and even just hydrating, like smaller things like that do make a really big difference. Like we forget that our skin is our biggest organ. And so we need to give it the same kind of love that we're giving to the rest of our insides, right?
For sure. Yeah. And I'll say like, I've never been just like having this like huge weight loss goal, but I was over 200 pounds. I got all the way down to 127, and I did that in a very like fast way. And when I did that, I still had this like loose skin pouch on my stomach. So after rebuilding muscle and then getting back to like a body composition where I felt comfortable, that kind of went away. Like there's still a little bit there just from being overweight, but that's the thing is like testing back to genetics. Even when I was competing elite as a CrossFitter and you could see my visible abs and like I was ripped, but I didn't look anything like the other elite competitors. And I would attest that to being genetics, you know, like I'm just never going to have completely like washboard ripped up abs, no matter how hard I try. You could make it look that way in photos and based on how you're posing. But when I'm standing there competing next to somebody else, like it's very evident, like my genetics versus theirs, if that makes sense. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, where do you feel good? Where do you feel strong? Where do you feel like you're able to show up at the level that you like to in the rest of your life? And that's what's most important. Totally. So I know we're running over a couple minutes. It's so hard not to when we get Krista on here with us.
I know, we could talk for hours.
We want to make sure, well, first, thank you everybody for joining us today. Thank you, Krista, for taking this time out of your day. Krista has a podcast that you should all definitely plug into. And then anywhere else that you would want to share with them where they could find you, if you can rattle that off for us, and then also just drop it in the comments on this video after we close out.
Yes. And to that end too, if anybody watches this later and you guys want to drop a comment of another question, I'll monitor the post. Like I said, I've been a part of this Facebook group, so feel free. I'm happy to just kind of, expand on anything that we talked about today, because obviously we could go into tons more details, and we did, I think, accomplish a lot in a pretty short amount of time. And I hope that everyone found this helpful. But if you're interested in more conversations like this is exactly what I try to facilitate on my podcast. I've actually had Jillian and Jamie on before. They're due for another interview soon. So I'm going to give this as our little note to put that on our calendars too. And my podcast is called The FYX with Krista Huber. You can find it on Apple and Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcast. And I spell FYX, FYX, because as you guys can probably see at the bottom of my Zoom screen, I spell Krista with a Y. So just kind of a cute little name thing going on there. And then my Instagram is the best place to find me. If you want to get connected there, send me a DM. My Instagram handle is at the Krista Huber. I also have an Instagram for the podcast, which is at thefix.officialpod. So message me on any of those platforms and I will definitely circle back with you guys. But we are so happy to be able to get in front of other groups like this. I'm always so happy to see how many women Jillian and Jamie are able to bring in and like just really continue on this mission of debunking a lot of the myths and helping people redefine success, looking beyond the 21 days, the 30-day plans, even 6 months, like 2-3 years. That's how you define if your plan, your personal approach was successful for you. If you can sit here in 2023 and 2024 and feel like you actually figured it out, and that doesn't mean your weight's not allowed to fluctuate 5 pounds, 10 pounds. Maybe you go through a season where it's even 20. I've been there because things in your life change. But here's what you get to come back to every single time. The tools that you're building by working with these two are invaluable and will serve you through the rest of your life.